now we're gonna be live. Yes, yeah, that's so good. So we are live streaming. So let me go on. Okay, and Baku Power BI, Excel, and Innovate with Better Meetup group is sponsored by Enterprise DNA. Enterprise DNA gives 3 free annual enterprise membership for its great, say, training platform, and really it's a good place where you can get more information about Power BI, SharePoint, R language, Python, other Power Platform products, so on and so forth. And let's go on with the next slide. And Enterprise DNA organizes some summits freely. It's free of charge. So the next summit is going to happen for the period of 23rd through 27th May 2022. It's all about reporting and data visualization. So you can freely join to this summit, and it will be a benefit. You will get it will be very useful for you. And so as for today's speaker, let's meet today's speaker. Today's speaker is a great lady, great person from USA, Helen Wall, who is a LinkedIn instructor, who has a great posts on LinkedIn. And I hope Helen Wall will give the necessary information about herself, right? And also, I would like to give a little bit information about our next speaker, who is Heini Ilmarinen from Finland, and who is going to talk about Azure infrastructure for the Power BI data consumer. And it's going to take place on May 4th at this time. Okay, so we'll be very happy to welcome you also in this event, right? So I think also all our meetup sessions are recorded and live streaming in YouTube. So if you don't, and if you are okay with this, so you may go on watching our session. If not, you may leave this session, so no problem. And also you may see that in last previous sessions organized by Baku Power BI and Excel Meetup group, we had speakers from USA, Melissa Quates and Matt Allington from Australia. So you may check this my YouTube channel and watch these videos. And I think it's time to define our winners, and it will take only just 2 minutes, right? So let me switch my screen to my Excel file, right? So in the last previous session, roughly 97 people have attempted to join to our previous session, and here you may find the list of people who attended the previous session more than 50 minutes, and the number of these people you may see in next this sheet, and the number of these people is 31. So attendees, and here we can see the unique list of these people, right? And here the number of these people, so 31. And in this part, actually these names are not the correct one, but here I have implemented, I have used Excel functions like index and rand between to define my winners, right? So when I'm just pressing on F9 button on my keyboard, so and when I'm just releasing my fingers, so you will see the names of winners. And it's very possible that one name will be repeated for 2 times. If this kind of cases, issue happens, I will repeat the process again. So let's start. I'm just pressing on F9. So I'm sorry. Okay, F9. Okay, F9.
Hi, Ilgar. You're not sharing your screen.
Oh,
I don't know if you're supposed to.
Yes. Today is not my day. Today is not my day. Sorry. Okay.
It's gonna be a great day, Ilgar.
Yes, really?
It is.
Yeah.
It's turning around. You should go to the casino.
Casino, yeah. Actually,
Yes.
yeah, there is no casino, in my country. I mean, I
Oh,
don't know. I'm not dealing with this kind of issues. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of people are. Yeah. I'm very sorry. So I will not begin. I will not begin. I will not repeat the case. So let me go on with defining our winners. So I don't want to take your time, right? I think you are okay with this case. So here, dear all attendees, you may see the number of people who just attempted to attend our previous session, right? 97 people. And here the list of people who have attended the previous session for more than 15 minutes, right? I think you see my screen now. And also here we can see the unique list of those attendees, okay? And the number of these attendees is 31. And here I have used, my functions, right? Excel functions index and rand between. When I'm just pressing on F9, just let's have a look, it automatically randomly selects the winner's name. So when it's very possible that one name will be repeated for 2 times. If this case happens, I will repeat the process. So I'm counting back 3, 2, 1. And here we can see the names of our winners. These are Paras Metalia, Chuck, and Nico Bots. So if these people are attending this session, okay, so please be so kind as to write me. Anyway, I will share all the materials in my, on my Meetup groups page. So you will find your names if you are winner, of course. So that's all from my side. Sorry for the presentation. Sorry for not sharing the screen. It's time for our presentation, and today's presentation is about the newly released 14 Excel functions. So, and Helen will go on talking about this. So I'm stop sharing my screen. So Helen, you can share your screen if you have presentation. So go on. If not, I can also start with the Excel file that you have sent me.
Yeah, so I'll go through kind of a short overview on my end. I'm just putting my PowerPoint into presentation mode.
Okay.
Okay, so in this session, I'm going to talk about some of these new Excel functions that came out. And there's 2 groups of them. And okay, so there's 2 groups of them. Really, we have kind of these text functions, and then we have array functions. And they're actually related, right? Because we're essentially what we're doing, common thing that many of us see in Excel is we get a string, like let's say an address. And we want to separate it into, like the country, the zip code, the city, the actual street address. And so being able to split functions for all you Power Query fans out there, it's a big game changer because it takes a long time to split text otherwise. And so a lot of these functions are kind of taking these functionalities that existed in programming languages, and we'll get to that in a second, and kind of making them more accessible through Excel, right? Excel's a lot more forgiving in terms of like data types, for example, than Python is. And so what we're looking at here, these 14 functions, we've got 3 text functions, and then we have 11 array functions. What these array functions do is they change the shape of that. What we have an option where we're changing the shape. Essentially, what we're doing is if it, let's say we have a 2 by 2 array, we're going to use one of these functions to change it. And we can also combine them together, which is very useful if you've got, multiple arrays that we're trying to access, and then you can also resize them. In that case, it's essentially filtering them, right? You're removing some of the columns, removing some of the rows, trying to make that smaller to work with. So what is an array? So if we look at this, these numbers, what essentially this is, you think of this as, row of, I think this is 10. Each one of these has a number, right? Each one of these is a number, and you can put anything in them. We could put, text values, but I use numbers. Excel's a number tool. Excel's, works best on numbers, and so this array, this stores these values, and what we're really interested in is like, how do we access them, right? So in that case, we have an index. And so this is saying, okay, this is like position 0. And right, so each one of these values in the array has a position. We can access it by accessing the position. And Excel are, their indexes starts at 1, and the array starts at 0. So one analogy to this is Python. And so I know this isn't, a Python, this isn't a presentation on Python, but I've been using a lot lately. Last day of the Python course that I'm teaching is today. And so one analogy is, if you look, the NumPy library in Python is one way that we can think of how arrays work. And so in this case, really, what we're interested in Excel is this 1D array, right? In this case, we have essentially 1 row, 4 columns, right? This could be 4 rows, 1 column. And then we've also got 2D arrays. And so 3D arrays, we're not going to worry about those because you can't actually, enter a 3D array in an Excel file, but we can see how these arrays are shaped. So they're not necessarily, they're not a specific size, but we can, this could be 1 by 1. But what we're looking at here is, okay, like, and how can these Excel formulas change what they look like? So one kind of way to think of it, these functions, is if we look at this NumPy cheat sheet, where you can see how you can change the shape of the arrays. You're reshaping them, you're stacking them, and in some cases and I don't think this one focuses on reshaping and stacking, but there's also NumPy functions where you can select a certain item in the array. You access it. Okay, I want to take the second item in this array with 10 items in it. So Ilgar's going to share his screen because I don't actually have the functions on my computer, which is kind of a bit frustrating. So Ilgar's going to share his screen with the file that I created, and we're going to kind of talk about how these. Okay.
So you will need, okay, stop sharing. Okay, and I'm just gonna share my screen. I'm sorry. Okay, so I think you may see yes. I think you see my screen, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So we have a text string here, what comes first or last, and we have a list of functions that we can use these text functions on. So if we look at this function list, so Ilgar, let's see what text before will give us.
Okay, so let me type text before, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have to select this text, right?
Well, you want to select what comes first or last. So that's
yes,
the string
okay.
you want to work with.
Okay, let's begin from here, say text before, right? And then I'm selecting this one, right, comma?
Yeah. So then let's use the space as our delimiter. So we want
Okay.
to put the quotation, then space, with the space in it.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, go on, please.
And then we can just close it off. We don't need anything else. We can just close parentheses.
Okay, so
So in this case, what we're looking for is we're looking for that space and we're taking whatever text comes before it. So let's update this example. Let's choose like, so we see let's use the first, right? Because that's the first instance of F. So let's add another function below this. Let's just keep that so we can see it.
okay,
And then let's use text before.
okay, I'm selecting this. Then go on with
F. Well, let's put F instead of the space.
okay, F.
F in the delimiter.
Okay,
Look.
then comma.
And then just close this off because you're not looking for necessarily the instance number. Okay. So this is, so let's see what this says. So go click on the warning sign.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So one thing we see is that as we're typing in the formula, there's two requirements. We have to input the text string, then we have to, which is going to be whatever text we want to split, and we have the delimiter, we want to specify how we want to split it. And there's optional parameters in there. So the third parameter is we're looking for in the function, and it's optional, is we can choose the instance. So let's use text before again.
Okay. Right. So I'm selecting the text.
And then we'll use the space again. And then the instance number, let's select 2, see what that gives us.
One more comma, right? Or what? Yeah.
Well, we're looking at the instance number.
Okay. So
The
what to
2.
enter? 2, right? Okay.
And then just close the parentheses.
Yeah. What comes?
So we see how this moves, right? So we're looking for the second instance of the space. And so that's optional. Otherwise, it defaults to taking the first instance. So then there's a fourth parameter in the function, right? The first 2 are required. The third one we just showed, and then we have a fourth one, so ignore the case. So in this case, let's see the F again, right before. So put it as a
capital, okay, right.
And then, so comma, and we'll just use like 1. And then in your case, let's make that true. So we see how this is split, right? So we're looking for the F in this case. So now let's actually change this to L. We can tell the difference. Go into the same formula.
Capital L.
Uppercase, yeah. So we can see that in this case, because only the first letter is capitalized in the string, that it's going to look for either the uppercase L or the lowercase l. So that's really helpful. And there's a lot of I spent way too much time fixing capitalization. So that's the example of text before. So, right, so text after is going to kind of work from the other side. So let's check out let's check out the text after. We'll put the header on for text before.
Okay, so text after, right? I'm selecting the case.
And we'll use the space again. So it's a very similar structure. And then what we're doing here is we're essentially splitting it, and we're taking what comes after that first instance. So in this case, it's working from the right instead of right. Text before works from the left of the string, and text after works from the right. So it's the way, essentially what we're splitting it is we're taking.
Okay, yes. What's the,
So the use of the instance, someone asked, is that you're essentially deciding which delimiter you're splitting by. And so it splits it into two. And so text before, right? So essentially, when you split it, you have to decide where that delimiter occurs. And so that's what the instance occurs. Otherwise, it's going to default and take the first instance of it. If we don't want that, we would add, 2 or 3, however many spaces. If we added 10 to this formula, it's going to not work because we don't have 10 spaces in there. So what it's doing is the way that the delimiter works, it looks for that space and then it essentially splits the text at that particular position. So anything before, what you would see in the text before function, anything after you would see in the text after. And so in a way, this is a lot like the arrays, which we'll get into in a second, because what you're doing is you're taking the text, you're determining how to split it in two, and then you're determining, in this case, by the function, which position you're taking it. So you can almost think of if you're splitting what comes first or last, and this actually segments perfectly into the text split function. So let's check that out. This works a bit different. This
Helen,
works differently.
Can I ask you a question, or can I clarify this, please? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, let me understand this correctly. So we use the space as the delimiter, and if I put the instance as 1, so in that sentence, what comes first or last? So it splits it.
Why don't we look at text split and that will explain a lot of it.
Okay, maybe I'm going ahead of time. So thank you.
so let's go on with text split.
Mhm.
So I'm entering text split, right? And I'm selecting the text.
Mhm.
Okay,
And then we'll use space again.
space. Okay. And
And
row.
just the close parentheses.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier with arrays. So essentially what we can see, so can everyone go on mute? There's noise in the background.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
what we see here is, so this is one way to think of how these splits work, right? How text split works. So we started with a single, right? We have our string, text string in a single cell. And then what we do with the text split is we're taking that text string and we want to essentially, this is an array. And so when you now have 5 different, we've essentially split it into 5 different elements. And by that space, can you put everyone on mute other than us really quickly, Ilgar?
what to do? Sorry?
There's a lot of background noise. Okay, that's good. So essentially what this is doing is when we use text split, we create an array of 5 different text items. So when we access text before, text after, we're essentially taking this array. And so text before, if you're by default, will choose the first delimiter. So if you kind of look at this array, it's got 5 columns, 1 row, and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to take the first split. So it's going to take what, right? And then if you put 2 in for text before, it's going to go to that like second column. So it's essentially going to split it 2 and whatever's after that. In that case, there's 3 that's after that. So then text after works in the other way in that you're taking the items from the right instead of the left. And the interesting thing about this is, like, let's see we have the text to go into the formulas, right? Because this is not necessarily what we see a lot in Excel, in that to go into like the first, you know, the cell that says first, just go into that, the formula, just go into the cell so we can see the form, what the formula looks like. So this essentially, what we see is that instead of having like a result in a single cell, right, it's kind of spreading it across those cells. So it's taking, you know, what was one cell before and making that into, essentially breaking it up into 5 items. And so this is very similar to what we see, you know, if anyone's familiar with Python, what I mentioned with the Numpy arrays is that we want to essentially split, you were splitting something into multiple items, or maybe, you know, in the arrays, we'll see in a second, we're starting with several items. And what we're doing then is we're figuring out what we need to, what we're accessing. And so the text split is really kind of a high level look at how the text before and text after works. This is taking, you know, this is showing us a high level of like what all those items separate into, and then text before and text after, that's kind of a way to isolate those items. So what we then, essentially what we're doing for text before, you can think of that as like we're concatenating what we're taking in the array. So this is it's quite neat how this appears, right? So if we click out of it, you see it spread across. It's right, we only put the formula in one cell, and then it's when we perform the text split, we see it spread across 5 columns in this case. So that's one way. So the text seems kind of a bit like out of left field in the way, but it's really kind of an important part of how the arrays work. So then the next thing, let's take a look at combining. Okay, so in this case, we have 4 different arrays, and we have a few different the functions for this. So we have VStack and we have HStack. So let's actually talk for a second about how, so these arrays themselves, they are, in this case, the first, so our first array 1, right? So this is going to be, it's 1 row, it's 3 columns. So it's essentially a 1D array. But it's actually, well, actually it's a 1D array because we only have a single row. So if we, let's see what VStack does if we put array 1 and array 2 together. So do the highlight array 1 over, yep. And then, and let's just do the first 2. Okay, so this creates an array. Essentially what we see now is we have 2 rows and 3 columns. So this is 2 by 3 array. And let's also, so this is kind of an interest, this is one example. I've seen a lot of questions, you know, so if I sum product is an example, or even if you perform a sum, right, essentially you can pass an array and you're summing it up over, or you can calculate like an average. So if we do sum, let's just do an example with sum product, even though it's not a new function by any means. So let's do sum product, and we'll do array 1 and array 2, and then array 2. So what this is doing is it's taking 1 is multiplying by the same, the item that's in the same location in the second array. So we're taking 1 and we're multiplying by 4, and then we're adding 2 multiplied by 5, and then we're adding 3 multiplied by 6. In this case, what we see is the arrays have to be the same size. If we try sum product, let's do another example of sum product. And let's do array 2 multiplied by array 2 and array 3. Both rows, yeah. Okay, so we get an error because the arrays are not the same size. So let's see if we can VStack. Let's see what the VStack will look like if we do arrays 2 and 3. So we'll put that below. Oh, you can leave that. Oh, you're moving it. Awesome. Okay, so we see that this works if the arrays if the arrays are the same, right? We're stacking them, they have 3 columns. Let's actually, I didn't add this. Let's add another array and we'll just do like, so Ilgar, if you want to add the array for, let's add array 5, like underneath it, underneath the other ones. Sorry, on the left, because they want the arrays to be different. We want let's create an array 5. Let's create something called array 5.
Which array must I choose, Helen?
Huh? Actually, let's just pick part of an array. So let's actually do this. Let's do array, do array 3. So VStack again. I'll do array 3, or array 3. And actually do a comma, and then do only the first 2 columns of array 4. Only the first 2, so over 1. Yep. Okay, so this is interesting. This was something that I was wondering with what would this return. So what we see here is it actually does combine the arrays together. However, because we don't have, first of all, you can combine the same thing what we see with the sum product. For example, you can use more than 2 arrays. You can use 1 array, you can use 2 arrays. In this case, we have 3 arrays. But because we only took the first 2 columns for array 4, there's nothing in there. So it doesn't do a 0, it actually gives us an NA. So it's saying, well, there's nothing we can put into that position. So we're just going to, warn you about that. So VStack is essentially stacking them on top of each other. And it works best if the number of columns is the same. But if you don't have the same number of columns, it does account for that. And so it returns a result, but it's something that we want to be careful of. It's how are we accounting for the NAs if we're using them in other functions. So now let's talk about, so VStack is essentially stacking the arrays on top of one another. And the arrays can be, they could have, what we see here is that the arrays could be of different, dimensions, and it will still work. So HStack is aligning them essentially side by side, like left, right. So it's going to be, typically a wider array. So let's see what this looks like for, let's do array 1 and array 2. So then now let's do, array, let's do HStack of array 2 and 3. So we see that similar to what we saw with VStack was that because we don't have values, the first array only has 1 row. So it lets us combine them, but we see the NA for the dimensions that don't match, because it's going by the dimensions for the largest array. In this case, instead of as 2, it's going to account for that. So we can combine these functions together, and we can also, let's combine, why don't we combine all four of them together using HStack? So we have a very wide array, and right, so this is essentially combining them together, and we have them side by side, like one after the other, instead of vertically like we saw for VSEC. So combining arrays together is not super useful by itself, but if you're using in other calculations, it's really helpful to combine them. Like many things in programming, there's a lot of things that are useful put together and not particularly useful when they're standalone. So now let's look at shaping. And so what this is doing is we're changing the way that the arrays appear. And we could use some of the arrays from the combining sheet, but it's a little harder to see. So we want to change let's see what, if we apply to row, right? So we have array 1 has essentially what we see here is we've got for the first rows, ABC, ABC, and then we've got a second one for the numbers. So let's see what happens if we do this. I don't think you need, just do the first one, close it off, see what it does. Okay. And there's a warning message. Okay, so we see there's a lot of zeros. We don't have any zeros in ours because what it's doing here is it's actually taking it's taking the blanks from returning zeros. And that's interesting. That would not necessarily be what I would expect because we saw NAs when we tried combining them. Dealing with nulls is such fun. Each language deals each, if I go to Python, I have to think of it one way. If I go, DAX, Power Query, how are they accounting for nulls? Because sometimes null is blank, sometimes it's 0. Sometimes you want to remove them, sometimes you don't. So this is an example, we combine them all together. Maybe doesn't really, what it's doing here is it's changing the dimensions. So let's copy this formula down, or let's add another for to row underneath our LGAR. So let's just unwrap the first, let's see what, if we do to row for let's do to row again. And then, so we keep, let's look at, so ignore, let's see what the options are for ignore. And this actually, we'll keep, do the array 2 because, okay, I think you have to put them together. That's putting the second array in the second parameter. So you just have to hold down the control key for that. Yeah. And then ignore, so keep all values in, so ignore blanks, ignore. So let's do 1. And then we'll just close it off. I don't think we did, let's just not include the scan by column. Okay, so now what we see is actually the array looks slightly different. We see that what it's doing is it's taking this and it's putting it in a single row. And in this case, what we're doing is the blanks aren't zeros, which is what it does by default. Instead, it's just skipping them. So the array itself is smaller, right? Essentially, there's fewer columns within the single row because we told Excel to ignore that. So let's see what this looks like if we try this with columns. So this is kind of the sibling function of to row. This sounds like Topo Chico for some reason. Like, oh, it's a call. That's keep thinking that. So let's just do the default, see what it looks like. Let's do the first one, default. Okay, so what this is doing is it's almost transposing the to row function, except we want to put this. So reshaping is what we're doing is we're taking, in this case, what is the two-dimensional array, we're flattening it into a single column in this case, rather than a single row. So we do let's do the two call similar to what we did for the two row, and except let's skip it. Let's choose that option for one again. So let's add another example of that. Let's see what the scan by column. So let's see if we do true. I actually I normally use 0 and 1. Okay, so this particular, I think this is the examples that we have. I don't think that's particularly well. Actually, we'll see how the shape changes. So essentially what it's doing is it's changing the way that it looks at it. So instead of going across the row, it actually goes down the column. And then, so essentially it changes the way that it unwraps it. So what we see is essentially it's taking that first column and essentially doing that. So like A and 4, and then it's doing D and 7. So it looks quite a bit different because we're changing the way in which we reshape it. It's the same values as if we just use the default, but because we gave it a non-default parameter for that, that's the third, the third input. It's instead of using that as false, we're doing that as true. So it changes the way the array resizes. So that's an example of essentially taking 2D array and making it into 1D. So now let's see how we can reshape it using the wrap rows or wrap columns. So let's actually use array 3, as this is, okay. Sorry, I can't, I need to move this box. Okay. Okay, so the wrap count, let's say, let's do 1. And then, yeah, we'll see what that returns. Okay, so this is saying, okay, wrap rows. So essentially we're seeing what this looks like. And this is kind of a bit of like a deceiving way to just try. So let's see what happens. Let's do the same function and put 2 in that parameter. And by vector, they mean array. Okay, so this case, and actually let's separate. So, or let's separate them so they don't look like, let's put a space in between those, or you can put this at the bottom. So in this case, the second parameter in that function, let's go and see the formula looks like. As we're deciding the number of we're essentially saying, okay, the wrap count is the number of columns we want to display. So if we did 3, let's put this below, like let's put this below the other 2. All right, so this is putting this into 3 columns instead. So in this set, because we have 6, right, we can put it, these are all, kind of nicely fit. So let's see if we did 4, what would happen? Okay, so this is right. So this essentially changes the shape, right? So when we shape it, this is actually reshaping, because the arrays already have a shape. What we're doing with these shaping formulas is essentially reshaping them into a different shape. So where it was at one point, this would be 1 by 6. We're changing this into 6 by 1. We're changing this into 3 by 2, 2 by 3. So it's changing the array structure, and that's helpful for, different, for if you want to change, calculations. And this is, I did, when I learned machine learning, you only use NumPy. And so reshaping the arrays kind of ended up being something that, I definitely use NumPy a lot. And so reshaping the arrays is really useful for a lot of kind of calculation, right? For a lot of calculations. And there's formulas then you would pick up to use these reshaped arrays in. So for example, sum product, right? You could do it, you could even use sum, you use a mean, right? Essentially what you're doing is you're changing the data shape, and that's, earlier we showed that sum product, right? The arrays have to be the same size. If your arrays aren't the same size, you could use one of these functions, reshape the array so it matches, and then use it in a formula. So it's kind of saving some of that, some of those errors that would appear otherwise. So then let's go into resizing. This is the last group of the functions. Was there another one? Oh, there's wrap column. We should just, do you want to just briefly do wrap columns? And this is actually somewhat deceiving if I don't, is that so we saw like with wrap rows, you're really choosing the number of columns. So with wrap rows, we want to choose the number of rows. So let's do 2. You have to enter the row number. Use the one you did before, array 3. This is taking a 1D, like now use the array, just array 3. This looks like it only takes a 1D array. So you kind of, yeah. And then do 2. Right, so we select, when we wrap the columns, essentially what we do is we select, when we put the 2, indicates the number of rows we want to use. So if we did this with 3, you would see that the number of rows is actually 3. So if we check that really quickly. Okay, so this is taking 1D, essentially taking a 1D array. And we see that it doesn't work with arrays that have, with arrays that are 2D. So in that case, what you probably want to do is you'd want to unwrap it first using like one of the like to row to call and then wrap it if you want. So that's kind of a common, that's pretty, I would say standard, or it's a commonly seen, kind of approach with arrays is that you may have to unwrap it, essentially unwrap it and then rewrap it into the shape you want. So now let's talk about resizing. I think we're running a bit short on time. So, okay, so, and this was interesting. So let's just do an example for each of them. So, well, let's see what the dimensions of take are. So let's choose array 1, and then let's do 3 rows and 2 columns. So 3. Okay, so then essentially what we're doing here is we're choosing the rows and columns we want to. This is a way to filter an array. So drop, I think, works in the opposite. Drop is very similar, except what we essentially do is we're telling you what we don't want. So let's do 2 and 3 and see what it, yeah, we did, or 3 and 2, let's see what it does. Okay. So, and this is probably an example where I would draw a diagram, because what we see here, actually, let's change the input to 3, because the order for the other one was 3 and 2, just so we can see how this, so do 3 and 2, the order for the, so the second parameter is going to be 3, yeah. So what this is saying is it's saying don't essentially remove the bottom 3 rows, and then you're going to remove the last 2 columns. And this works from the bottom. You're removing the bottom, and then the bottom rows, and then you're removing the rows that are farthest to the right. So it's essentially keeping everything that's in the top left. It works from that top left and removes, what's not, essentially removes what we specify to take from the bottom and from the right. So, and this is interesting, right? Because it's a lot easier to think about what you're going to keep rather than what you're going to take. So the one way we could essentially, if we do the opposite of the take to create the same table, so let's just do the drop. So let's do another example of drop. So in this case, we're going to select the same array, and let's remove the bottom 1 row, so 1, and then was 2 is the second parameter, a third parameter. Now that's okay. Actually, I didn't check this. This one is actually doing this from the bottom right. So this is an example of, and I think this is interesting because essentially it's not working from that right. A lot of things work from that top left. So this is working from the bottom right. So that's really interesting. It's working from the bottom. So I think this is something that's, something I definitely would keep in mind. So now let's look at choose rows and see what that's. So now essentially what we're doing with the take and drop was we're using an index. We're saying take, for example, it's saying take the first and second columns and take the first, second, and third rows. But we're not specifying, like, they don't have names. We're just using the index to identify what, the positions that we want to keep. So now let's see what choose rows will give us. Okay, so we're going to select, in this case, what we're doing is we're not, let's take, so we see that the row is optional, row 1 is optional. So let's do 2 and see what that gives us. Okay, so this is taking the second row. Yeah. And see what, if we choose rows and same array. And then 2, and let's put 3 in for this. I think this is, yeah, let's see what 3 does. So it's essentially, that's the row that it's stopped, like that's the ending row. So if we did that again with 4, oh, 2 and 4. So 2, 4, yep. Okay, that's what it's doing here is it's taking, essentially taking the 2 rows, but it's not taking the one in between. That's interesting. And then let's see, choose columns, I think works very similarly. So let's just choose column 3. Okay. And then now let's check out expand. And then see what that returns. Just okay. So just close the parentheses. Okay, that's okay. So
sorry for interrupting you. We have to add, if we would like to add some columns. So
okay.
we should show it. Okay.
Okay. Well, select a smaller, could you select part of the array and see what it will add? So only choose like the first 2 rows and 2 columns, see what that does.
Expand, this is my row, right?
Just the first 2 rows and columns.
Okay.
For the first 2 rows.
First 2 rows.
2 rows and 2 columns.
And columns say 3 or 2. No, doesn't work.
Just only take that. So instead of C13, do C11.
Repeat again, please.
C11 instead of C13.
Here.
11.
11. Okay.
And I think you just do, what is that a row? What? So this isn't one that this was one that that is new to me too. They mean by rows, are we adding?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's okay. So I think here. Sorry, you hear me well? Okay. So what should we do? If I'm not mistaken, we have to select, let's say, all the rows, right? And we would like to add 1 column, right? So in this case, let's say if we leave it blank rows, and if you
Well,
would like
that
to,
you have to populate that. Well, yeah. Okay. If you're leaving it.
okay, so say 1, for example, not.
Okay.
I don't,
You've got 2 commas in there. So if you
let's
put
see,
1 there, yeah.
then 1, and here columns. We have to show the column number. It must be at least 50, for example. If we say 50, yes, okay. So there are 4 columns, right? So we have to add the next one. Next one is 5th one, right? And if I'm not mistaken here, there's no need to show row because, So, and what I would like,
if you select the smaller one, like let's say instead of B10 through E13, if you selected B10 through like D12.
E12.
Or D12.
D.
Yeah.
D12. Okay. Yeah.
And then let's see what that returns. Okay. So then I think you can specify what goes in there. So if you have that blank.
Okay. And last point, Helen, sorry for interrupting you. We should add also here path width. What does it mean? For example, we can show as a space, or for example, we can add something like this, right? Yeah, it will work. Okay, so
awesome.
That's also an okay, good. And you can also add something like this. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
That's our Canadian friends. Anyone on the call?
So can we stop sharing or what? Okay. Thank you very much. I think there were
Q&A or
okay. There were some questions. Let's start from beginning. I think Shwanant Shastri. I think you answered to this question, but then Vasil asked this question. Text before is the same as left formula with advanced features, right? Text after is the same as mid formula, right? This is his question.
I didn't. What's the question being asked for that? When I can look at the chat.
Okay, Vasil is asking. Text before is the same with the left function. In Excel there is left function, which does the same like text before with advanced features. Yes, that's right, Vasil. If I'm not mistaken, that's right. And the second part of his question is text after function is the same as mid formula, right?
Well, no, I would say it's similar to right.
If you don't mind, I would like to ask to answer to this question. What is my answer? My answer is that it roughly does the same like mid function does, but to get the output using mid function, you have to use other functions. For example, find or search, something like this. But using text after, I mean, you can do it directly. So it's very handy. So that was Vasil's questions. And then Claudia Rivera asks, what Excel version do I need to have? Is there a way to download this formula to my version? Any answer?
Oh yeah, there's a reason that Ilgar's sharing his screen. I don't actually have them myself. So.
If you don't mind, also I would like to answer this question. Dear attendees, if you would like to get the latest features of Excel, what should you do? First of all, you have to be Office Insider. Okay, so there's a program. Just Google how to become Office Insider. You have to follow some points. I mean, some steps. And after that, you will see in any of your Microsoft Office programs, something like this, Office Insider, right? So also, just I will take a minute, right? Just 1 minute. Let me active my Zoom it. I don't know why this is always deactivates. Okay, so that's works. So what should you do? You should. I'm sorry. you should be member of, say, Office Insider, right? This Office Insider from file and then account. And also, if you would like to take to get the latest updates in a week, you have to subscribe to beta channel. There is also monthly channel. Monthly channel gives you an opportunity to take updates in a month, but beta channel gives this opportunity in 1 or 2 weeks. So it's very handy also to become Office Insider and also to subscribe to beta channel. After that, you will have an opportunity to use this function, okay? And so for now, this function is available only for Office Insiders. It means Office 365 version users, right? So,
you have to enable you access.
Okay, so this is the next question from Nawai. Helen, can we download some update for Office 2016 Professional or not? I don't think so. What do you think, Helen?
I don't think so. And the other thing is the beta channels, they're still being tested. So it's kind of one of those, like, have fun, play with these on your own, but you know, there may be things we're still trying to fix.
Okay. And also one more point I would like to tell you is that this question is very useful when you are using this question, I mean, not question, just these functions with new array dynamic functions. Okay, for example, you can use with unique or with XLOOKUP, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I think we don't have time to show it, but if you show you, okay. So that's all, I think. So it's 1 hour, 10 minutes. I kindly ask everybody to turn on their cameras to see each other. Let's arrange 5 minutes for ourselves, and I will take a photo for memory. So if you don't mind, okay, Mr. Us is here.
Oz should get one of his shirts.
And Claudia.
It's in the wash.
No. I just see. I just woke up right before this, so I just had to put something on so that I wouldn't get arrested. Yeah. So I just grabbed what was close. So, but here we are, and there's Claudia Hoschel.
Yeah.
Always,
yeah.
Always, yes.
I Oz.
You can't XLOOKUP, but like I'm going to defer to Oz on that one.
What on what?
XLOOKUP.
Oh, XLOOKUP, yeah. Who?
Yeah, they have a great video related to XLOOKUP function with Win Hopkins, who is from Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yep.
That was my video. Exactly.
And we had our summit. Yep. Anyway, all right. Okay,
so no other person wants to turn on their camera, so no problem. Just smile. I'm just going to take a picture if you don't mind, and I will post it on my Meetup page. So here we go. 1, 2, and 3. So that's okay.
See, these other people think they're so attractive that we got to pay them money to put their camera on. See, that's the thing. Yeah. You got to pay money to take my picture. That's what Goulet is thinking. Oktay. Yep. Canool. They all say, you got to pay me $100 to take my picture.
Your pronunciation.
Want to learn Python now, Oz?
Huh?
Can I interest you in learning some Python?
No. I have done programming in my life, and it's just a headspace I don't like. I don't want to change oil in my car. I don't want to mop floors. Programming is just like, it's a tough mental space.
Today's life without Python and our language cannot be, solved. So it's a must. If you are dealing with data analysis, so you have to know. It's my opinion. maybe I'm
Well,
wrong.
I think that like, and this is maybe in discussion, I think Oz may have, can speak to this. She's like,